What is going on, GarageBand? You're missing it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and as my host companion, Sejan, just said, all this gold content. Because I didn't tell him I was starting recording, because it's a stealth Sunday recording start here at the Say Report.
He doesn't even tell me we're recording an episode. He calls me to hang out, and then the next thing I know, he starts the show.
Yeah, he's right. That's exactly how I did it this week. You know why though? This is a weird episode of the Say Report. This might be the weirdest episode. This might be the weirdest episode of the Say Report ever.
See, you couldn't say it because even you know that can't possibly be true.
Well, the fact here's the thing though. Usually with the Say Report, we come in and we know that we don't try to do a weird episode. We're like, we're going to do an episode of the Say Report, and that's what it's going to be. And then afterwards, as we're going over our notes from the recording, is when I go, man, that was a weird episode of the Say Report, right? And so that hindsight knowledge, that's important. But this is a weird animal. This is a hybrid animal. Yeah, this is a hybrid episode of the Say Report, and not in the fact that like the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe guys are going to show up, or Say Report Junior is not going to show up, or even Friends on a Couch people are not going to show up. This is still an episode of the Say Report, but we have a little bit of housekeeping to do.
Okay.
Because we lost last week's episode of the Say Report, the first actual factual lost episode of the Say Report.
Like unrecoverable lost.
Unrecoverable lost. Have to completely rethink the recording studio situation. And even then, some of the parts I need that would make it safe, quote unquote, to record this week are not in yet. But we have deadlines, and we already burned through our Death Becomes Her episode. I guess I was stupid to wish that we could make it to July 2022 in that.
Oh, I'd say a man can dream, man.
A man, yeah, exactly. That's what Death Becomes Her is about. If you haven't watched the episode, but there's stuff in that episode that I would love to touch on and still talk about. We're just not going to dedicate, that lost episode. That I want to talk about, but we're not going to dedicate the same amount of time that we did. For example. You don't know it, even though Cedar and I had a 20-minute conversation about it, but my smart washing machine this week was done right before recording.
Nice.
Even though I put my clothes in 10 minutes later than I did last week.
Yeah,
and it still went 20 minutes longer.
They just weren't as dirty as last time.
I guess that's also very true. I did not do a lot this week in terms of things to get me dirty.
And so the smart machine just could have sensed that these ones are a little grimier. They need to go a little bit longer. That's the whole idea, right?
That is
really what it's doing is it's judging you at every moment. Every time you put an object in, it's like, really? This bad? Oof, okay, here we go. I estimate about 45 minutes for this one. Thanks,
really? This is essentially a clean shirt. I'm just gonna spin cycle it one time. You don't know. Man, that's even scarier when we think about the singularity of all machines coming together. That my washing machine is judging me.
Family spaghetti night. I'll be sure to add 10 minutes to everybody's load tomorrow.
Oh, no. Thank God we don't have a live calendar like that, but it would know, wouldn't it?
Right.
It would track and... Oh, my God. Okay, now I'm freaked out. So we're moving past it. Smart washing machines, though, they're going to be the downfall of humanity. Where'd you guys end up landing? Are you still searching?
We got it. We got our washing machines. They're stacked and everything. The problem is that in the act of stacking, for anybody that doesn't know, stackable machines, more often than not, I guess I shouldn't say all the time, but basically 90% of the time, the dryer will be the thing that gets put on top. It is the lighter object than the washing machine. And because of that, all of the basic hookups that they sell you with a washing machine in terms of like the power cord and the exhaust and all that are all really built for it to not be stacked. So like you need an extra like 4 feet added to all of that stuff. So we got it all together, got it all stacked, lifted the damn thing up and got it up there. And then we went to go hook everything up, and washing machine hooked up fine because washing machine is just washing machine. It's right there. It's still on the ground, right? Went to go hook up the stuff for the dryer, and everything was about 4 feet short. So like dummy on us for not considering like, oh, this will add length to everything. We just didn't even consider that.
So now here's my question there. This is an actual real question that I have about it. So you're not supposed to plug in major appliances, read refrigerators, washing machines, dryers, ovens, into like extension cords or power strips. It's supposed to be a direct connection to the wall.
Well, especially with dryers, because
Yeah,
they
because
are
they eat
so
power.
powerful. They
Yeah.
actually have their own proprietary plug. Like they're not like an Edison three-prong plug.
Yeah.
Like it's a yeah. But sorry, your
No, no, no.
question.
So my question is, do they sell like a specific rated extension cord for that situation?
No, what they sell you, and this is something else I didn't know, is when you get a dryer, you don't the plug is already detached and it's up to you to attach it. And
Okay.
so what you can do is you can just buy a longer one to attach. So there's like a panel in the back to like open up, you like snake the cord inside and then three screws and boom, you're hooked up with your plug. So basically you get like a small quick lesson in like electrical engineering whenever you buy a dryer, just as a warning to anybody out there. And I'd never really known that because we'd always bought our dryers and stuff like secondhand. And so normally they just come with everything just already attached and somebody just duct taped it to the back, right? This is the first one we've ever gotten that. This is also secondhand, but this is the first one we've ever gotten that came kind of factory like ready. Like there was all sorts of like good indications that it had never been used. So even though it had been owned, so it was pretty cool. But yeah, we we had everything together. We got the dryer up there. We pushed everything kind of into place with just enough room for us to still work. And like I said, hooked the washing machine up, feeling really good. Got up onto a step stool to get up to the stuff on the back of the dryer, and instantly realized our mistake. I was like, oh no! So we got one more day of that. But by the end of the day today, I'll finally be able to wash them clothes.
Look at you! Congratulations! And are these smart or are they dumb? Are these
No,
dumb
no, no.
machines?
They're smarter. Like there's all sorts of like unique settings, and there's like alternative settings that like if you hold a certain button down, it goes into like a shift key mode, and like you can turn on other settings as well. Like there's all sorts of crazy ass settings. These are the ones. These are the kinds of ones from probably about 5 or 6 years ago that we're getting way too out of hands with your options to the point where somebody said we might as well just make it a smart display at this point.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so like this is the reason that yours exists.
Man, well, we don't have a smart display on ours. Ours is still relatively dumb, but it has a real thought process about how much time your clothes need before
Yeah.
they're clean.
Yeah, yeah. It's very much up to me to know that, but there, like, no joke. I bet I could find like a setting for spaghetti dinner night.
Oh, I'm
Like,
sure there it is. I'm sure it's like Shift F8.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Cool. Well, congratulations on your new washer dryer, and I'm glad that we still got to talk about it a little bit. The more important one, the one that we had gone like really deep on, is it had been 4 episodes since the exit of Mickey Ramirez from Walker,
Oh,
and I was waiting
I
for.
was worried you meant from the show, and I was like, no, we need.
No, I know. We do need it, and so did Walker. And I'm actually really glad that all of the discussion we had last week about the show finding itself in these weird 3 episodes they took to sort of recalibrate in the wake of Mickey Ramirez leaving before Cassie Ortiz joined. Mickey Ramirez, played by Lindsay Morgan, and Cassie Ortiz, played by Ashley Reyes. That Ashley Reyes stuff is going to be important going forward. And not for Walker, ironically enough. But last night we watched the 5th episode, which is the first episode with Cassie Ortiz as Walker's new partner, not just like an introduction episode.
Right.
And a couple of things that I noticed, and I know, like, from a business standpoint, why it's the case, because if she were actually named as an actor, she would have to get paid more money. But while she's a special guest star,
Yeah.
her paychecks will be smaller, which is not great. It's not a great way to circumvent the fact that this character is, by all intents and purposes, a lead actor.
I mean, it could just be that it was because she was brought on unexpectedly
Right.
mid-season, right?
Exactly.
Like we still don't know exactly what happened with sorry, give me
Lindsay
the first
Morgan.
actress's name, Lindsay Morgan's exit from the show. Like this is something that we lost, but we did talk a little bit about the idea that like there was it seems enough to be amicable from the outside, and God, I hope it is because like CW is not well known for the ways in which its actresses exit their shows. But
the other
yeah.
important thing to note is that the first season of Walker premiered in January of 2021, wrapped in August of 2021,
Right.
and then the second season started in October 2021.
Right.
So
So,
you want to talk
yeah,
about, like, we went
yeah,
real deep in the fact that the CW is like soap opera is the background of a lot of the people who are creating in that space now,
yeah.
and how they're used to, 6-day scheduling
Yeah,
and
at
a
the
new
very least,
episode a
like
day.
the
Like,
oeuvre of the ways in which they treat it, right, is very much that same idea of like, no, this is just your job. You're just going to shoot every day. This is just what you do. And
yeah,
then, and other television networks are like, no, there's an off season, and that doesn't seem to be the case at CW. So anyway, so yeah, so we're not quite sure on the full details of why one actress left, and now suddenly here's this other actress on, and it seems like it was not an expected exit. So the idea that they maybe don't have her contracted proper yet because
proper,
it
yeah.
was a
But I
yeah.
also feel like the nervous thing about it is not just CW keeping their options open, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
that's totally a thing. If this character doesn't work out, if we don't like working with Ashley Reyes on the show, if she doesn't gel with the cast, we can find somebody else because she's just there. They sort of gave her a nice story arc where she's trying to find her missing partner. And
yeah,
once she finds her missing partner, it would be very easy for her to be like, well, I'm going back to Dallas. Peace
yeah,
out, Cordell.
yeah, yeah,
Or if she is liked and stays with the show and everybody wants it, then, they maybe make her an actual lead in the third season.
yeah.
If they get a third season. Because let me tell you, the fifth episode since the exit of Mickey Ramirez from the Ranger service, I love Walker Texas Ranger, and it's just called Walker. The show's just called Walker. I shouldn't confuse the two. I love the show, like almost in spite of myself. This is a show that I'm like, I'll watch it because Jared Padalecki and I liked the theme song from the old one, and then I fell in love with the show to the fact that like it became must watch scheduled viewing for me. Like
Yeah.
I'm there on Thursday nights to watch it new, and it like this episode was such a fucking departure from everything that had come before it. And the fact that like they took 3 episodes to try to recalibrate a world without Mickey Ramirez and weirdly leaned heavily about how much Mickey meant to the show. Like
Right.
the captain of the Rangers was like, she was going to be my successor. Like I was totally grooming her to be the next captain of the Texas Rangers. It's the reason I hired her. It's the reason I took her under my wing. I now only have Cordell Walker, and that scares the shit out of me because he is not ready to lead.
Yeah.
So it was really weird, this like heavy lean into her. And then the episode with Cassandra Ortiz coming in, it was a heavy Cassandra Ortiz episode because they're trying to do all the work to build her up.
Right.
She had 2 scenes in the new episode. They rock climbed together to bond. Cordell and her rock climbed, and then she had to drive home. So the second season of Walker, right? Just brief overview. The old neighbors who had vacated the ranch for about 20 years next door, the Davidsons, have moved back to town. And essentially the Walkers and the Davidsons are the Hatfields and the McCoys. Like no hyperbole there. Their feud is so legendary that like random people who come to the town are familiar of the folklore of it. And I mean, granted, that's a TV show, so it's written that way, but like that is the level. Hatfield McCoys is the level you need to approach their feud with.
What a wild subplot. Okay.
So, and also like secondary subplot, the first season sees Cordell lose his wife, and it's him recovering from that, right? And that happens in the first episode.
Right.
And then it's how he's recovering from having lost his wife, and how he's very like toxic and pushing everybody away. And then he learns to love again, right? He understands his family, and he maybe is starting something up with Jerry, his wife's and his oldest friend. And it's this whole thing. But then when the Davidsons come back, Denise Davidson, her and Walker had a little like attraction to each other when they were 13 years old. Mm-hmm. But that led to the Davidsons' barn burning down, and that barn fire being what killed her father.
Oh, God.
So, like, huge kibosh, and it's what elevated the feud from just like, we don't kind of like each other to you fucking killed our patriarch, you goddamn Walkers.
Wow.
Lot going on there. And Denise Davidson is currently married to a man named Dan. I can't think of his last name, and it doesn't really matter. The really crazy thing is that Annabelle Odette plays Jerry, the woman that Cordell is going to be dating, and it is actually her husband, Daniel Odette, who is playing
the baddie,
the new husband, the husband of the Davidson guy. Like, it's cool that they've kind of kept it in the family, this show, because Cordell's wife was played by Jared Padalecki's real life wife as well. So there's a weird sort of nepotism going on Walker that really fits the CW if you think about it. But that guy, like her husband, and they're estranged and they're separated, but for some reason he still moved with them to Austin. It doesn't make sense at all why he's still living with them, but they're like in a trial separation and about to get divorced. He didn't trust the Walkers so much that he got into bed with a drug dealer and helped supply a what's that thing? Reconnaissance, but not reconnaissance. They were basically spying on the Walker Ranch. Surveillance. They hit a bunch of cameras around the Walker Ranch, and it's revealed that this guy was one of the people behind that.
Wow.
Which is why, like, Liam didn't trust him. He's like, I feel like he has something against us. Like, why was he so close? And how did he know that something was going on here if he didn't have something to do with the surveillance? And everybody waves Liam off like he's just crazy and feeding into this feud that we need to end if we're going to move forward as a family. Now, right, that guy got immunity by acting anonymous and providing information from those surveillance tapes. Because of course he fucking did. But then the DA, and that's his wife, that's Denise Davidson, found out that he was part of it. And now, rather than like turn him in, the guy who like, I don't like it because you lied to me, I want a divorce from you, she's totally turned the other way to protect him. Where like, so they just threw away her character from the start of the season for this whole thing. And like, and Cassie Ortiz is not there to like be part of it. It was like this weird soap opera-y. It felt like I was watching an episode of Dallas, not an episode of Walker last night. And it's like, this shit needs to wrap up. Because where this show worked was where each week they had a case and it somehow fed into the larger machinations going on in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what this was an episode written before they had Cassie Ortiz. And then what they did is they just worked in some episodes with her because now she's here. Yeah. Like, it sounds like this was one of those, like, weird, like
it felt like it was one of those things. It's the discussion I always say where Spectre. Spectre feels like a sequel to Quantum of Solace, not a sequel to Skyfall.
Yeah.
We needed to do something in order to change the perception because Quantum of Solace fell on its face. So we completely reinvent the Daniel Craig Bond movies, do a kick-ass movie like Skyfall, and then once everybody's watching again, we'll release the Spectre script as was.
Yeah.
and everyone will be fine with it except for Devin Decker. I still haven't seen No Time to Die, but I really want to. I'm looking forward to watching it. I'm not going to go out of my way to see it, though. That being said,
yeah, it definitely was not worth the risk with everything going on with COVID. But I mean, I haven't seen it either. But I am in that boat with you, where like it was not worth it for me. But once it comes out, I'll be happy to watch it.
I mean, and I think it is. But I'm going to wait until it's like on one of the many streaming services that I subscribe to.
Yeah,
I'm not going to rent it from Amazon. Yeah. And all that being said, so Cassandra Ortiz is now on Walker. She replaced Mickey Ramirez. We had talked about it in the Lost episode. They did a good job. I do want to just celebrate how Walker brought her in, because Mickey was this like once in a lifetime first female ranger, first ranger of Latin descent who had joined. And, you know, I didn't want them to just slot in another like Mickey Ramirez and just have it not explained. And for Cassie Ortiz to come in, she was inspired by the work that Mickey was doing, which is why she became the second female ranger in Texas Ranger history. And then she's also happens to be of Latin descent.
Yeah, and I'll say what I said last week. Like they just need to be careful with this, because it becomes very it stinks of plug and play, which is like the worst kind of like tokenism. Like with that, CW again is another thing that they're not necessarily known for, is their ability to handle diversity. But yeah, we'll see how they do.
Which I think is another thing that was like not great about this episode, is the action she was doing, because it felt like maybe they would have been written with Mickey in mind, especially the whole, we need someone to come down to this bar and escort the DA's husband home. He's drunk out of his mind. Like, that would be a Mickey Ramirez job. That, like, you know, I'm neutral on this. No, you're not. You're Walker's partner. Like, he doesn't know that Cassie Ortiz is Walker's partner, because in the beginning she's like, oh, I was supposed to meet with the DA today, and that got postponed, and that's because the DA found out about Dan being involved in it. Dan Miller is his name. Yeah, so it's just, I'm going to keep watching and I'm going to do it. But if I don't think that the show will survive another season if they don't figure out a way to recalibrate themselves.
Yeah.
They are spinning out pretty fucking hard right now.
That's a shame, because it was such a good show in the first season. But like I said, we don't know what happened there, and maybe it's the kind of thing where maybe it's the show should have just
maybe
ended
the show should have just ended when Mickey left. Yeah. And this could be a 13 episode season. I could see if they do a 13 episode season, I could see them getting a third season in order to, because they'll have that time away. And even though it's shortened, as opposed to other networks, I think what they really need to do is just wrap up everything that's going on and then, like, start a new story.
Yeah.
Because that works. We've seen that work. But the reason why I want to bring up Ashley Reyes, who's playing Cassandra Ortiz, is she's also in another show that we've covered this season of the Say Report, and that's How I Met Your Father.
Yeah.
And it is night and day. And I just want to celebrate Ashley Reyes as an actor. And the fact that Hannah, who she plays on How I Met Your Father, I mean, this is something that I use, and I don't know if other people get it, but she kind of looks like she smells like soup.
I don't get it. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what that means.
I mean, to me, it represents sort of a dourness of the character. Yeah. Like her face is so full of life when she's playing Cassie Ortiz, and Hannah, unfortunately for How I Met Your Father, which I'm fairly certain the season finale is airing this week, and we will drop in on it, but it's a reminder that it probably ends this week.
Yeah.
If it's a 10 episode season, which is what Hulu sort of likes to do. And the 9th episode left on that sort of cliffhanger, like, oh my God.
Season finale, yeah.
And it was excellent. I loved the 9th episode, but Hannah was there, and Hannah, as opposed to Cassandra, they're night and day characters. Hannah just seems like, oh, all I do all day is stay at home and prepare soup. So I'm sweaty from the soup steam in the air, and I'm not happy because my life is just making soup. Where Cassie Ortiz is like this strong character, and it's night and day, to the fact that, like, the only people in this house who know it are Dale and I. Mom and Dad watched the two and do not see that it's the same person. Like, so, and kudos to her, because that's the mark of a good actor, when you're able to play two characters who are so diametrically opposed, to the fact that you're unrecognizable to people who are watching both of the programs you're in.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's awesome. I am sad to hear about Walker, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. It's just, I was so full of hope last week, and all of that hope is gone. Not just because we lost the episode, but because of how they followed it up.
Yeah.
And there you go. Is there anything else we touched on last week before we get to the affairs of this week that you think we need to hit, or?
No, nothing huge. I mean, that was pretty much our main points before everything went.
Before everything went pear-shaped, yeah.
Yeah.
The only place that lost power in my house was the studio, and not because I blew a fuse. I still don't understand what happened.
Yeah.
But it's good, because I should probably have a UPC unit and all that stuff if I'm going to be recording the way that we are, right?
Yeah. No. Yeah. We I mean, like, I've been getting some stuff together too. I installed these really friggin' wild they're basically Wi-Fi, well, so it's not Wi-Fi, but it's Ethernet extenders through, like, AC power.
Nice.
So, like, it's a plug that you put into your plug, and you can still use it because it just covers it up. It barely just covers it up, but it will convert the power into an Ethernet like information exchange. So you can plug your computer into that, and then like as long as you've got your router going into one upstairs, like it'll just basically treat it like it's Ethernet. And they cover their ass. They're like, we don't promise it's going to be the top of the line Ethernet, but in hard to reach places, it's ideal. So like we are in a house that is all brick and cement, and so like it's just a pain in the ass to get Wi-Fi anywhere. And we've been kind of using Wi-Fi extenders and things like that, which are great, but you do lose quality after a while. And like no joke, like my download speed on this computer jumped from like 40 megabits to 85, like just by plugging it into this little thing. So like we're running pretty sweet now. But that was like one of our big projects this week too, is trying to get the internet sorted in a house that like you don't own. So we can't just like go into the walls like we want to. And on top of that, like you want to call like a guy to do it, like for that sort of stuff. My dad and I used to run cable in our house all the time, but like I don't have the desire to do that anymore. And at that point, you're like, do I need to call Xfinity to come and do this? Because I really don't want to friggin' talk to Xfinity today. I just don't have that in me emotionally.
Right. And then the other question of do I need to talk to Xfinity about that is if you bring something to them that they don't want you to do,
yes,
they'll either up your price or they'll just kibosh it. Yeah. And it sucks.
Well, like in running other accords and stuff, what are they gonna? They're probably gonna charge you, and they're probably gonna say that like, oh, and while we're at it, we need you to upgrade your internet. Yeah, it's
you're inviting them in to screw you over.
Exactly. I just have no desire.
It's essentially a booty call. When you call the cable company, it's for a booty call because you're gonna get fucked.
Yeah, these things are pretty wild. This idea that you could just plug it right into just your AC plug, and you can still use that plug to then plug the computer in as well. But it just has a little Ethernet port on it, and you run a cord from it, and it's just like you have Ethernet running everywhere. It's cool. The only thing, there's a couple of caveats. It needs to all be a connected circuit. So like if you're in a really big house, there's a chance that a room on one side might not be on the same circuit as another, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is that you can't run it through any type of power like unit, like you're saying.
Yeah, it can't be a power strip. It needs to be direct to the wall.
It needs to be direct. Yeah, so the power strip can go into it once it's plugged in, but it can't go into a power strip itself. So you just need to make sure you're doing the right order of operations, I guess. Yeah. But it's been pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean that's why we got what we did during the pandemic. The like little coax modems that I found online that then turn any coax jack in your house into a modem that can then be Ethernet plugged into it. So it's all wired connections. We went from we were at 70. We had pretty good internet over the Wi-Fi stuff, but it just was, we had so many items now being used at home simultaneous that we were seeing degrades. By putting this in, everything is topping out around 110 megabits per second, which is wonderful.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, I mean, it took work. Like I had to figure out a lot of things, and it's fantastic though. These guys are great. Plus, it got to work off of all the existing wiring that my father and uncle did when we first moved into this house.
Yeah.
So it's very nice.
Yeah, these kind of alternative solutions have been really cool to look into, because we were convinced that we were going to have to just deal with Xfinity and pay them and maybe not tell our landlords and surprise them with like, hey, we put cable into other rooms, because it is an upgrade. Like at the end of the day, our landlord probably would have allowed us to do it, but we didn't even pursue it with them because we were just like, we don't even want to deal with Xfinity. Never mind to explain to our landlord why we're putting holes everywhere. So it's just we live in an old house. We're renting an old house. It's the oldest one in the neighborhood, and so like there's just a lot of weird things about it that like other houses don't have to worry about. Like the idea that there's only 2 cable jacks in the entire house, and one of them is right behind the front door. Like, what the hell are you going to do with that? You're not going to run it to a TV over there with like.
Yeah, that's strange.
It's a weird place for it.
I could think of like 4 things I would want to do with it, but again, I'm bananas. I'm a crazy person. Yeah.
But that's so that was really kind of the only other big thing from a couple of weeks ago that was worth mentioning.
It's simultaneously very cool, but also depressing and representative of the dystopian hellscape we're currently living in, that we've developed so many tools and workarounds to keep a rented space from looking like you've done anything to it.
It doesn't looking like anyone's ever lived there.
Yeah, like it's because that's perfect. Like what you just talked about, that internet over electrical sockets. First of all, it's brilliant, intelligent. It's the type of shit they're talking about in The Cable Guy when he's like the electrical grid can be this and play Mortal Kombat with a friend in Vietnam. Like it's exactly what we should have been looking at all along. Though also that's why our electrical grids would be such a huge and easy target for people, and why Texas is like we have our own grid because we're afraid. Don't mess with Texas.
Yeah, we're afraid of being attached to the major grid, even though it seems like our grid is not
even
much
though
worse,
our grid is essentially two raccoons fucking.
Yeah.
Sorry, Texas. I've seen the grid. It's very tittillating, but I don't know if I'd want to risk it for my entire state. All that being said, so Ethernet over electricity is a wonderful thing, but you have to imagine one of the only reasons that we came up with it is precisely for the situation you're describing.
Yeah.
Is so that you can have wired internet in your house without making any major damages.
Yeah, and renting is definitely one of the major ones for that. But there's also, there's like rural homes and things like that where people just don't. Part of it is that it's an easy thing to explain to somebody. Is why run more cable in your house when you've already got cable running to every room in your house? Just plug this in and boom, you're good to go. Is like the selling is clearly the selling.
Is
point,
it grounded? Right? I actually have a question about it because it's something I'm curious about. Does it have a ground pin or is it just 2-prong?
It does have a ground pin, but very often those kinds of things will be kind of meaningless.
No, I know that. I understand that, but
no, I mean for our audience, they just because something has a ground pin on the outside does not mean that it's connected to anything.
Yeah,
just so that you're all aware. But no, it does have a ground pin. Yeah,
I guess that's the reason I asked that.
Because the other reason why it probably has a ground pin is more than because it needs one, is because if you plug anything into it that needs a ground, it needs to have the ability
to ground it, and that makes perfect sense. I guess the reason why I'm asking and making sure of that is I have seen a bunch of rental properties like over my time of visiting people and just looking at things where they only have 2-prong outlets.
Yeah, nothing's grounded.
So it's something to take note of. First of all, if you're going to rent a space and you don't have grounded outlets, don't rent that space. Something
smells like ozone and the walls are all warm.
That's the best advice that I can give on this episode of the Say Report is don't rent a house where you don't have grounding, because eventually it might need to get fixed, and that will put you out if you're renting there, or it will raise your rent so that the landlord can cover it. Yeah. But it's really not hyper legal to have ungrounded outlets anymore.
Yeah.
But some of the places, because they're old enough, are grandfathered in.
Yeah.
It's an important thing to take note of.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, you want to look out for 3 things when you rent an apartment. Is you want to make sure that it looks like no one else has ever lived in it. You want to make sure that there's grounded apartments, and you want to make sure you don't have a Reese Witherspoon ghost. So, I mean, those are the...
Just like heaven. Well, I guess we've gotten to the Mark Ruffalo section of the show. I take that to mean that you maybe watched The Adam Project this week?
No, not at all. It was suggested to me after I finished Just Like Heaven.
That's fair. Because that just released on Friday.
Yeah, I know, because instead what we watched was Turning Red. I missed that Adam Project came out because we were just so excited for the new Pixar dropping, and we hung out and watched that on Friday night.
Okay, cool. So here's the choose your own adventure story of it. Both of us saw Turning Red, but both of us also saw another movie. We can call it Turning Black.
We should talk about Turning Red just because we've name dropped it.
Okay, all right, but I want to talk about the other one too. Oh, yes. I did go sit through this movie and have a whole experience.
Part of it is that with Turning Red is I really loved it. I think there's a lot going on in terms of where Pixar is maybe possibly moving with some of its animation. And the biggest story about it for me, though, is at the end of the day is just I cannot believe that Disney screwed it by just dropping it streaming with like everything that's been going on. I don't know.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going to start, right? And this is interesting because I was just asked if we were going to do an episode on Encanto, like a full-on hardcore episode about Encanto. And my response was, I don't know if we are. And they're like, well, you should at least do We Don't Talk About Bruno. That's something that you guys should do on the show. So
what, sing it together?
Yeah, I guess I don't friggin' no. But it's something that did come up. And Encanto has been coming up a lot lately, and I think mostly because of the release of Turning Red straight to Disney Plus. Because of that discussion of all that. But for me, they're thematically very similar films. And I liked one of them a whole hell of a lot more than the other.
I don't know. Turning Red has a lot about like puberty and growing up that I don't remember being in Encanto. Yes, there was a lot of things to do with like female relationships, but we're allowed to have more than one of those.
Oh yeah, no, we're definitely allowed to have more than one of those. But I think
I mean, like the largest theme about Encanto seems to be like the idea of there's definitely stuff about like heritage, and that's definitely something that's there. But the thing that doesn't seem is just she's a grown woman who is very sure of herself in that movie, which is like the complete opposite of everything in Turning Red, which is kind of makes it not similar.
So I guess where it comes from for me, where I compare the two, is things that Mei talks about, or Mei Lin talks about in Turning Red, is having this pressure on the world and to be perfect on her. And those are two things that the sisters represent in Encanto. And it's really kind of difficult to connect with that part of the story when they're happening to secondary characters and not the main character. Mm-hmm. So, like, by putting those two pressures onto Mei Lin and also making her a 13-year-old, like, not even that she's a female, the fact that she's 13 years old and still feels that way, like, it makes a lot more sense. And I guess the difference between something like this, broaching those feelings, are everybody kind of feels pressures from society is more the message of Turning Red, plus everything else that goes on in that movie, and we'll address it. But then in Encanto, it's more the fact of like, it was like family is the enemy in this sort of weird way. Like, I don't know, because you're not wrong. Like, the main character from Encanto, I couldn't even tell you her name. I was not a fan of Encanto. Spoilers for that whole thing. Where I said
let's be honest, that's probably the real reason why we won't ever do a full episode on it.
Yeah,
I would give it another. I enjoy that movie, and I love like the music and everything in that film. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to move the needle on one of us, we're probably not going to do it.
It's not really what I'm just going to be sitting here like, no. I'm just going to say Bruno the whole episode, even though we're not supposed to talk about him. But yeah, it's one of those situations where I didn't really dig it, and then like Turning Red, I'm like, I really liked this movie, and it's not because like the animation is different or anything like that. I think it's just I felt more for the character in a lot of ways, where the Encanto character, like the fact that she didn't get her door, spoilers for Encanto, it doesn't really affect how she approaches the world. Like, in spite of not having a power, she's sort of the most well-rounded and confident member of her entire family.
Right. Yes. All of these are reasons why I wouldn't compare the two movies, by the way.
Right, exactly. No, that's fine. But I think that, but then the messaging of Encanto is still supposed to be those things that are definitely part of the message of Turning Red.
Yeah.
Of like, you don't just have to go with what your family has said for years because that's the way things go. Yeah. Like, everybody feels these pressures on them. Do not feel alone in having them.
I think what it is that in both of them, it's about familial pressure. But like, this is not a new story. It's all about society and familial, and at the end of the day, culture, and the ways in which cultural pressures like all kind of come down. And that culture in both of these is represented in interesting ways as like not just this ancient culture that they both have. One being is set in a more Latin American style, the other being set in a more East Asian style, right? But on top of that, also the areas in which they are in the immediate, right? Like you get the small town pressures that you see in Encanto, whereas you get the city life Toronto pressures that you get in Turning Red. So like, they're both. I think what it is that I'm just happy that there's just more and more movies that are willing to address this kind of stuff just writ large, not just for women, not just for people of otherness, but also at the end of the day, like also just addressing this sort of stuff, because the idea of like cultural pressures forcing us into roles and things like that, like, is really only a thing that we've really been willing to talk about for the last 10, 15 years in kids entertainment.
Yeah,
you know,
that's certainly true. The fact that there are two kids films that are addressing the fact that you don't need to be what everybody wants you to be. And just
And hey,
because,
mom, dad, like maybe don't be like this to your kids. Like is also
yeah,
the other side
yeah,
of that. And
it's
yeah,
there's lessons on both ends. Spoilers for Turning Red too. We haven't really said anything too crazy right now, but if we are going to continue talking about it, I imagine that plot points are going to come up. And the movie just released on Friday, so
yeah,
heads up if you want to check it out, and definitely check it out. I recommend it. I also recommend Encanto because I know that just because I didn't connect on a movie doesn't mean that you might not. But the final difference between the two that I think worked for me, Encanto is very much secluded and removed from the world.
yeah,
Setting Turning Red in Toronto
yeah.
really kind of opened up the scope for what's going on.
Well, especially bringing in like 4-star and stuff. So like you have people coming and grandma and the cousins, right?
Yeah.
Like they come from Florida and everything like that.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely a sense that there's a larger world throughout that entire movie for sure. Yeah.
Which is a different, because for Encanto, I've said this a bunch of times. I might have even said it on the show. I thought that not getting the magic made her leave the village. So then, like, it was literally like the village from M. Night Shyamalan's Village, where that village is sort of frozen in time, but the modern world is out there. And then when they're having these problems with the house, like she's going to go visit the house again for the door ceremony for the kid who ends up with the animal powers.
Wait, why? What happened?
What?
That's not what happens in the
No,
movie.
that's not
I'm
what
so
happens in the movie.
confused.
That's what I thought the movie was. This is what I thought Encanto was. That she had gone out to live in the modern world, was back visiting for a door ceremony, and then the fact that she wasn't so stuck in the traditional ways of that village were what was going to help her understand and recognize these problems. And we'd see that they were kind of a systemic societal problem.
You don't get to ignore marketing because, that's a choice. If
Well,
you
let
want
me
to
tell you
ignore
though,
marketing.
that's the thing. The marketing for Encanto, all I saw was a shot of her which looked like she was in a car in a modern world. I
Yeah.
didn't watch any trailers or anything.
That's what I'm saying. Is you made a choice. You made a distinctive choice to not go with any marketing. You can't be disappointed when the movie doesn't meet your expectations when you didn't supply yourself with any information about the movie beforehand.
Time out. This is Devin talking directly to the Save Report listener. Though Sejin can hear me and still interact because I'm not Zach Morris, I want you to know that every time this year, every time in season 6 of the Save Report, I get Sejin to mention marketing and ignoring marketing and not seeing what was right in front of you, it's part of a larger story arc that I promise will pay off in December. Time in. I suppose you're right. I did ignore the marketing on Encanto, so then I was disappointed by it.
And be like, this isn't the movie I wanted at all. Well, then.
No, but I did not like it because it wasn't the movie I wanted it to
know.
be. Like that's not where I approached it. It was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, based on the few brief things that I was exposed to, this is what I thought the film was going to be.
No, Encanto, what it is they follow a very traditional Disney princess direction, wherein that the kingdom only really is about like 2 houses and a castle is really is like the extent of it, right? Like, I mean, you could see the same thing applied in things like Moana and things like that as well. But I mean, I also think of like Tangled, right, and that sort of thing. Frozen is a great example of this. For such a large kingdom, the Kingdom of Amalur, it really just seemed like they're just kind of centralized to about a dozen buildings and a giant castle, and then like they go off and they're instantly in like the Lost Woods that they haven't been to in 30 years, is in Frozen 2, and it's just like, okay, wait a minute. Like it's so the idea of the small universe is kind of built into the formula on those, and so Pixar, not being part of that formula, has that ability to do this, right?
Well, I think it's why Pixar all those years ago, I think it was during Inside Out, so 2013, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 2014, maybe even 2015. I actually think it was 2015, just being a complete asshole about this right now. It came out that shared cinematic universe of Pixar, and one of the reasons why that's not hard to see with Pixar films is because of how large the world is.
Yes. 2015, by the way.
What it was 2015, right? Yeah.
2015. Yeah, no, because they're not afraid to show. I mean, even going back as far as Toy Story 2, where like the whole thing about Woody getting bought at the yard sale and brought to a different place, and the toys having to go on a journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to find them. It's not Toy Story 1 where they just go next door. Like they have to go.
They go to Pizza Planet in the first movie too.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
mostly they
No,
go to the
and
crane
more to my
machine,
point.
which is hilarious.
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
idea that Pixar has always been very open about it being a larger world. I mean, let's be honest. The true example of this is Cars 2, right? Like, but
Cars 2,
world,
the best Pixar movie.
Hey,
I'll go to bat for it. It really,
but yeah, no, the reason that I didn't think we were going to spend too much time on Turning Red is because my feelings on it are kind of as they have always been with the last few Pixar movies, is that I'm really, really impressed with the things that they're willing to do. And it doesn't feel like every other Pixar movie because they're taking risks in certain ways. I think the biggest thing in this one that I think was really risky is that it is much more stylized after like new Disney, so I think there's like a large influence by guys like Alex Hirsch, I think, in some of like the comedy and animation in this that you definitely don't see in something like even as recent as Inside Out. Like there is some really unique to Pixar style like comedy and animation in this movie, which is just wild to say about like an animation house like that. But it's cool. It's just really cool.
Yeah, the anime influence to the whole design aesthetic is fantastic.
There's so many moments where I was like, that's Studio Ghibli, like straight out of that's Princess Mononoke, that's straight out of Totoro. There's Totoro all over it.
Totoro all over the movie. And that's actually one of the saddest things. Is one of the big complaints is the bean mouth, the fact that her mouth is shaped like a bean, and it really is kind of disappointing that there's this whole critical section of animation that just decided to market that stuff as Cal Arts and thus less impressive.
Yeah.
Because if you're not going to watch Turning Red because her mouth is occasionally shaped like a bean, you're missing out on some of the most gorgeous animation from Pixar. And this is Pixar. In their entire like tenure as a production house.
Yeah.
They've done it's one of the most beautiful Pixar films.
It really is. Like, and it sneaks up on you because you really don't expect it because of some of the goofier nature of it. It is definitely also, on top of being one of the most beautiful Pixar movies, one of the silliest. Like, it really is a goofy film, which you don't often get from them. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too, and I highly recommend it if you haven't got it. Though it seems like everybody's watching it. That's the other thing that I dig, is my mother coming to me and saying, everybody was watching Turning Red last night according to my Facebook, and her Facebook is very different from my Facebook. And what that says to me is not just that everybody is watching Turning Red, but that almost everybody has Disney Plus, which is really something when you consider it is now like
2.5 years old?
Not 2.5 years old. Netflix is like 60% more expensive with the newest price jump that they just had. And like, you're getting a lot of the same stuff from Netflix from a Disney Plus, and they understand the volume thing of it. Now, one day I don't doubt that Disney will raise the price, but for right now, they're making it work for them. Based upon the fact that if I ask somebody if they saw, well, we can use The Show as an example. Season, did you see Project Adam this weekend?
No.
Did you see Turning Red this weekend?
Yeah.
That right there's empirical evidence, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Say Report.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Right now, they're doing the early days. Like Netflix went through this too, where in the early days, like they were $7 or $8 to do it, and then suddenly one day they're 20. It's the drug dealer. Like they're giving you the first taste free, right?
Yep.
Like they're getting everybody hooked right now. And then in the next few years, we're going to see all sorts of possible different things that they're going to do. They're either going to just raise baseline prices and just have a whole bunch of new stuff on it, or I think they're actually going to go the route of the kind of like the Amazon Prime route, where everything's going to be on its own channel, quote unquote. Yeah. So you can pay to have like the Marvel package, the Star Wars package, the classics package, like that kind of thing. And they're going to do a lot of that kind of like mix and matchy stuff. I think that's where they're going, especially with them buying up all of the recent Marvel stuff back from Netflix and stuff.
Right,
which could not have been cheap. I mean, the idea that they were like Netflix produced shows that they just like they were like, we're just going to take these, thank you. Like, whoa.
Well, let's talk about this. Not only is it not cheap monetarily, the Parents Television Council, my favorite sort of villain to bring up on the Say Report,
Yeah.
they will not shut up about how wrong a decision it is to put Daredevil and Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Defenders and Iron Fist onto Disney Plus.
Well, so maybe they don't. Maybe what they do is they have a Marvel specific wing of Disney Plus that you have to like pay for, and you know there's a bunch of like parental warnings on it before you go into it every time. But right, like that idea of we will wall it off, like can alleviate some of that.
And they are introducing, so they do come to Disney Plus on March 16th. That's the thing to note, because, you know, I haven't watched a lot of the Netflix stuff, but it looks like a lot of the Netflix stuff is going to actually matter in the Marvel Universe. Take, for example, the fact that Kingpin showed up in the end of Hawkeye.
Right.
So maybe that stuff is going to be folded in now that it is actually going to be part of what Disney owns.
Yeah, especially because narratively with the multiverse, like they can include it all and never have to address it or address it when they want.
Speaking of which, I heard Avery Bullock's voice in the trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and that made me think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of those situations where we're going to see. But also when those come to on March 16th, Disney Plus has confirmed they're rolling out a whole new intensive parental control mechanism to make sure that your kids are not being exposed to things like that. And that really does seem like step one into the idea of walling off into tiny fiefdoms of entertainment. Yeah. Because they can use that as data to see what did parents wall off as kids only. So then we can make Disney Plus Kids. We can do Disney Plus Marvel. Like
Disney Plus Junior. I mean, that would be what they would call it, right?
Or Disney Junior Plus, because Disney Junior
Plus.
Yeah. It depends. Some semblance of those words.
Right.
Junior Disney Plus.
They've already got.
They've
already got the Disney Junior naming, so it'd be silly to not just roll with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or the Mickey Mouse Club, right? And that's your kids only one. I don't know.
It's cool to hear James Hong.
I love James Hong. Playing essentially the same character he's played in every other role since Big Trouble in Little China.
You know what, man? Dude's earned it.
He's totally earned it, and it made me smile, and it made me go, oh my God, James Hong.
Yeah. No,
but it's fantastic. Turning Red is just so good. I can't, it's really stuck with me. That being said, the best movie that I've seen over the last week is still The Kingsman. Because, oh my God, The Kingsman blew me away.
That's awesome.
I did not think that was a movie, especially considering how little I liked The Secret Service.
Yeah.
And then how much The Golden Circle really recovered that franchise for me. I'm like, prequel? Ugh. And then the prequel is so grounded in actual history that it was actually a really fun time for me to be like, oh, this is what's going to happen based in our history. Is it going to happen there? Oh, it did, but a little bit different.
Yeah, almost like all history is like a booming genre for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really, really good. And Rhys Ifans as Rasputin is unrecognizable. Nice. But the last thing I have to say about Turning Red, because I have been giving my father shit about it since we watched the film, this is a guy who cannot stay awake from movies. Yeah. He slept through The Kingsman. He slept through Adam Project yesterday. He slept through Free Guy. I don't need to talk about it, right? He stayed awake the entire time for Turning Red. Stayed up that whole movie. Not even like one of those, like sometimes he notices he nods off and then wakes himself up like little snores. He was invested in Turning Red the entire time. This is a man in his late 60s who watched that whole movie and then at the end of the film declared, I think that might be too scary for children.
Yeah.
And then had moments of citation. So, like, he not only watched the movie and stayed awake the whole time, it was engaged viewing from my father. Which means to me, his whole, I don't watch cartoons thing, that's bullshit. He just thinks he doesn't like cartoons, right? Yeah. If the story is engaging enough, he's going to be engaged. But second of all, I actually think he might have a bit of a point with the that could be scary for children part of it. It kind of snuck up on you, these like horror moments in that film.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely there, but I think the filmmakers, I had to not speak for them because they've been doing a lot of speaking for themselves, and you should look up some of the stuff that they've been saying, especially in light of some not so fair reviews, I guess is the
Oh,
best
we're
way
going
I'll
to
put
talk
it.
about the one
We're
where
not going to
it's
talk about
great,
Cinema
where
Blend
we
because
well,
fuck Cinema Blend, but
no, is Cinema Blend the one who said it? I want to make sure that it's the same thing that I heard.
so Cinema Blend had an editor, like a pretty high-end editor, release a review on this that basically was like, you nobody can connect to this except for a very niche audience. And
Okay,
everybody was
that's
like,
good. Yeah,
that's that's not a great way to read things, dude. Like he was like basically because this is about a an Asian girl in Toronto, they basically were like pigeonholing themselves to such a niche audience that no one was going to be able to connect to it. I think the last 3 days has proven that that is
that's the wrong.
horrendously wrong.
Can I tell you my
But on top
favorite
of that,
part of that is I brought that up with my mother this morning. Like we were out
yeah,
doing chores this morning, and I'm like, I really can't believe that an editor, an editor's review was no one can connect to this film because she's an Asian girl in Toronto. And my
yeah,
mother's like, that's just someone who doesn't understand the world. And
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, ma, it's not me. Please do not preach to me about it. I'm aware of the world. She's like, I have so many Asian clients who live in Toronto. And I'm like, I know, ma. I've been to the parts of Toronto that this movie was shot
Well,
in.
but what's even
Like,
worse than that is it's not even the idea that like this character couldn't exist. It wasn't. It's not even that. It's this idea that somehow people were gonna be unable to be empathetic to this character. Meanwhile, we have been asking people of like otherness and to connect to just like
to
white
connect
male
to white
characters,
people, the
white
entire
females. Yeah, yeah.
history of
Like
cinema. Yeah.
yeah, like Jesus Christ, we're not gonna be able to connect to her. Like
No,
it was
I'm
just ridiculous.
the reason
Like
I
I
bring
said,
it
I
up
don't
is
like it
that
too
like
much.
it is such a
Yeah.
myopic view of the world that
Yes.
that editor
I
has.
mean,
Like
to the point where Cinema Blend retracted it and issued an apology and said they're going to be changing their editorial process because of all of this.
that's
Like
good.
it has
That
been
makes
it
me
has been
happy.
acknowledged that it was a terrible review that was should not have been
Good.
released.
Then I'm glad we
Um,
talked about it because I didn't know about the happy ending, and to find out about the happy ending here on the show really does fill me with elation
yeah,
because
yeah.
because I read that I'm just like, what a stupid takeaway from anything. That
Hmm.
like only people who are exactly in this situation will be able to understand it. And it's
Yeah,
like, do you not understand like the growth and the depth of this situation? Right? Like you
yeah,
said, it's puberty. In a lot of ways, it's about puberty. And if it's not just about puberty, it's about your emotions and learning how to control them
right.
and understanding like finding coping mechanisms that work for you.
Well, it's really it does a really interesting job where it doesn't ever define any of this. This is all kind of like just kind of in the
Mm.
story. But the idea that it's not just puberty, but also like familial history that can lead to this sort of stuff. Like you're saying, like with some of the stuff with the emotions, the idea that like anger is something that gets passed on through generations and things like that. Like there's a lot of conversations about how growing up, you end up at this point in your life where you can't tell if this is a permanent thing that's happening to you, if this is just a thing that's going to happen once, a thing that's going to happen for a couple of years. Like you're in this weird changing part of your life, and you don't know what you're going to be on the other side of it. Is something anybody and everybody can relate to, and the movie does a really good job of just talking about just that. Right, like they mention that it could be this, it could be that, it might be this, but it never gives solid answers on what the right answer is. There's never a moment where because at the end of the movie, I mean, we did say spoilers earlier, but the ways in which this movie ends with the majority of her family deciding to remove the panda still, and her still deciding to keep it, and it being okay on both sides. Like it makes total sense for the women that decided to lose their panda, that was something that they had come to terms with and chose, and now they were finally being given a much more of a choice in this moment than they probably ever were when they were younger. But that idea that it was still okay for them to do that, and it was okay for her to not, was a great ending. It like just wild.
My favorite thing about her not giving it up, and this is totally my read on it, you take from it what it was, it really kind of felt like the original panda was like, I would totally teach you guys the actual way to control turning from panda to human. You were just so hopped up to get rid of it that I never got to take you flying to the moon and teach you that lesson. Like, it's one of
Exactly.
those situations where
Yeah.
it's just like, no, if you just accepted it, you would have control over it. Like, it was
Yeah.
like this cool final, like, sort of messaging to it
Right.
that
Right.
acceptance a lot of the time is a great way to beget control, right? And even if you accept something and you might lose control eventually, accepting that it's part of you is a really good first step to being able to control those parts of you that you might not love.
Right.
Or that might be looked down upon by society.
No, I think it's got a phenomenal message that, again, anybody can relate to. So fuck that guy.
Oh, you want to talk about anybody can relate to it? It made me realize that 8th grade is a hyper-formulative time in someone else's life besides me. I thought that my 8th grade experience, and just like the fact that in 7th grade they made me an 8th grader, but then I still had to do 8th grade. Like, you're still a 7th grader, but you're doing an 8th grade curriculum. And then we don't really have anything else for you, Devin. So now you're just in 8th grade. You don't get to go to high school despite being ready. And then, like, that whole year, like, it made me realize just how absurd school was. It broke the veneer of education for me. And that might be a good thing or a bad thing. I think that I've turned out pretty all right. And certainly some of the administrators who had to deal with me in 7th and 8th grade, I've had like adult conversations with, and they're like, yeah, it always kind of bothered us how far ahead you were and that we didn't know what to do with it. Like it was a pleasure to have to try to find a way to punish you, Devin, because so often if we gave you a punishment, you would be like, that doesn't really address the problem, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, and it was a formative moment in my life. And to see like that 8th grade is one of those formative moments for other people, because it's not just the character in it. You have to imagine in some way, like Domi Shu is telling her story.
Yeah.
And how she felt in 8th grade, and then just adding that magical realism over it. It's something like Sanjay's Superforce, the Pixar short that a lot of people, that's another one that I think of where a lot of people are like, how is this relatable to modern audiences? Because it's a bunch of like Indian and from India gods and storytelling, and people aren't going to relate. And it's like, it doesn't change the fact that it's a wonderful story. Right? Like, and then that guy, the guy who did Sanjay Superforce, ended up to go on and do another one that was beloved. I can't remember which one. That, like, he cut his teeth and proved himself on that. Pixar is something I should know more about, but I just don't.
Yeah.
And I blame Bug's Life. It just being like, oh my god, that's the movie, and I had just seen Ants. So, staying away from Bug's Life for so long, and then finally watching it and realizing and appreciating what it was about, that was a big moment for me in Pixar. I'll share that truth. But yeah, go see Turning Red. Even though it scared my father, you'll probably be all right. But just know that your kids, there might be moments in it where your kids are afraid. And those moments where your kids might be afraid, those are the greatest teaching moments that this film has.
Yeah. No, I think that, that's what I was getting at earlier, is I think that's exactly what the creators of this movie would say, is that sometimes there were scary moments when you were a kid, and you are maybe not necessarily prepared for them, and maybe it's good to have it in a controlled environment, like a movie, where you can be sitting next to mom and dad, and they can talk to you about these
afterwards,
things.
Right? And parents, talk to your kids after the movies, right? Like,
yeah.
That's the most important thing. Don't just plop them down in front of these films and then let them form their own opinions. Because sometimes you get from Clerks, it's cool to be like Dante and Randall.
Oh, man.
Just touching on stuff. Last thing, the only thing that bothers me on Turning Red, it is set in 2002, right? And that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that her friend Priya is reading Nightfall by Roberta Moyer. Twilight was still 3 years out. Is the only anachronistic moment I noticed in this movie. And it really kind of bothered me. Because they do a really good job of setting it in 2002. I mean, I was in Toronto in 2002. Not for anything. It's just like a fact of my life.
Yeah, I mean, they if it was Twilight, I'd maybe be more on board with you, because I'd be like, that book wasn't out yet. But the fact that it is just I guess it's meant
to be an XP for like the YA genre.
Exactly.
But
and like Harry Potter was already full force at this point, and then Harry Potter fan fiction on Tumblr was also kind of getting its whole. So
I don't know. It's just the cover art is the cover art from the first Twilight, and Roberta Moyer is Stephanie Meyer. Like it was just one of those situations where I'm like, That really bothers me. And then in the other voice, the Devin who's watching me get bothered by things is like, it really bothers me that you know so much about Twilight, you weirdo. And I'm like, shut up,
Yeah.
other Devin.
Like I said, if it was a specific reference and then
Oh,
it
yeah,
didn't work time
it's
wise,
even a
I'd
blink
maybe
and you
be with
miss
you,
it
but
moment too. Like
yeah.
it's the first time you see her, but there's been a lot of photos of that moment. Like it's become a meme. Her closing the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like, oh great, the one anachronism that I like was right in front of my face is now the meme, and not for being an anachronism, just for her no nonsense attitude when she shuts that book. All right, Sejan, it's time.
Yeah.
Talking about Twilight, I think it's time.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were going to use it as your jumping off point. I've been waiting for you to get
Oh,
on
you've
that
been waiting for
segue
me to get.
go. Come
I'm
on,
sorry.
Ballpark.
I'm sorry, Sejan. It's gonna take me a little bit to get going, just like this movie.
Yeah. So the other big thing over the last couple of weeks that we'd be remiss to not mention is the Batman's came
The
out.
Batman.
We finally have a Batman movie, Devin. It's taken them so long to finally do.
We don't have a Batman movie. We have the Batman movie.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, well, my first kind of foray back into real big theaters around here. Like I bit the bullet and decided like numbers are down like immensely and everything is looking really good out here. And I looked into the theater I was going to and the time I was going to, and nobody had really bought tickets yet and all that. And so I just went for it, and I went and I sat in a really nice, comfy chair, and I sat back and I watched a real good movie for 3 hours, and then I have not stopped thinking about the movie since I saw it. I'll be honest, I'm considering going back another time this week.
Then before we talk about the movie, I'd like to share my experience going back to the theater.
No, we should.
Because the only reason why I was willing to do it is the two theaters nearby my house, right? Because I was traveling. I had a boycott on Showcase Cinema, which I'm not necessarily certain that I've lifted, and we'll go on to why in a second. And they opened a new one where the Warwick Mall used to be called Apple Cinemas, which if you ever listen to Two Friends on a Couch, that's why I bring it up. I used to see movies at Apple Cinemas by Alewife Station in Massachusetts because my co-host on that show, she would work all the time at the Whole Foods in the same plaza as that Apple Cinemas. And I would drive her to work for those shifts and I would watch movies all day and then drive her home. And it was a fun time. So to see that there was going to be an Apple Cinemas in Rhode Island, I was very excited about that. And both of them, they opened on March 3rd. Showcase because it was getting renovated, Apple Cinemas because it was getting installed. And both of these have the laser projection 4K visuals. And come to find out, I didn't even know this was a thing until I went to the movies to go see the Batman. They also have Dolby Atmos technology, which is really interesting when you consider another origin moment for Sejan and I is working at an audiology conference in 2006, where we met with China Blue. I don't know if you remember meeting her. And all of the technology that is behind Dolby Atmos is what you and I get a backstage pass to while we were working that audiology thing. You don't remember hearing the tennis game get played around us?
Yes, yeah.
And her setup of like, I think it was 15 speakers, 7 up and down the sides, and then a front and a rear, so that like every minimal thing. It was so cool seeing it then, and now to see it in practical use. I mean, it took 16 years for me to see it in practical use, but oh my god, it's gonna change entertainment just the way that she said it would all those years ago. Because it's awesome. I don't know if you got to see it in Atmos, or if you've seen anything in Atmos yet. But,
no, I did not watch this one in Atmos. I had the opportunity to go to like a high end version of it, like you're talking about, but that was later in the day, and because of the length of this movie, and let's be honest, all of the ads and commercials, previews that they're putting before it, we are talking about a 4-hour like movie going experience minimum, right?
Yeah.
And so because of that, there are very limited showings around us, and so it was just like we're gonna reserve those showings till like later in the day since we can only get 2 or 3 of them in anyway. And so I went to a very dinky theater that still had very nice like seats and
Oh,
like good quality and all that. It wasn't like going to the
the
dollar
Dirt
theaters that
Theater.
doesn't exist anymore. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
wasn't
gone.
that, but I did not go to the high end
Yeah,
experience. The other thing is that for anybody that's seen anything about this movie, it really kind of spoke to me as the kind of movie I wish I could see like on film, right?
I
Like
agree.
it feels like the kind of movie that as far as quality goes, I kind of want that like graininess and that like to it. So it just it's a it's a dirty movie. I want to watch it on a dirty screen.
Yeah, well, and I know exactly where I would go to get that experience. But since these places were new and they had the X Plus technology, which that's what they call it there, they call it the Apple Cinematic Experience at the Apple Cinema, the ACE version.
Nice.
So I wanted to try Apple first because it's a brand new facility, even though it's just been installed into the Warwick Mall.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an 11 o'clock showing, which was perfect, right? Get to the movie theater at 11, be done by 1, maybe 1:30 with all the previews and everything that CJ was talking about, and still kind of have my day before me. I arrive at the theater. It is gorgeous in there, right? Apple has not scrimped in the, 7 years since I've been to one of their theaters. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed by what they're doing. But then I go and I sit down in my seat, and there's a huge sightline issue in my seat to the fact that I can not see the bottom of the screen. It is cut off by the row of seats in front of me.
So when you say sightline issue, this is the point at which you took a picture and then sent it to me, right?
Yes.
This is the yeah.
That's
so you
and
sent
that's
that
not
picture
me.
to me, and I thought you had like laid down or something. Like the you had probably a third of the screen, but it looked like it was almost half the screen was just unwatchable. Like, you
Unviewable.
couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And this wasn't with somebody sitting in the seat in front of you. This was just the seats were just that way.
That's just a seat. In fact, on some level, I feel like they were designed to have somebody sitting in front of you and then take advantage of the recline function because they were electronic recliners.
Yep.
And then if somebody does that, you do it. But also then once I reclined, you know,
you can't
my
guarantee.
head lowers.
Yeah,
and
right.
and it's just as bad. It was just really, really strange. And also the seats were very narrow. And I mean, I understand I have a wide stance. I have big thighs, right? From all my hockey days. I have strong legs. It wasn't comfortable. So I'm sitting there like I can't see a third of the screen at least. And it's going to be 3 hours. I'd prefer not to be like squeezed into the seat the whole time. And the last one is my leg kept activating the up and down for the recliner, which that would be annoying too. There were 3 people in the theater though. I have to say that. If you're somebody who's like just dipping your toe into going back to movies, early shows are the way to do it.
Yes.
I mean, they were always my preferred way to go to the theater because sometimes you'd get nobody in there because people seem to forget that movies exist before noon.
Yeah.
But
I don't want to gloss over the fact that you talked about how you were going to this theater because it was going to be the visual experience, and then when you got there, literally the one thing they got wrong immediately was the vision.
And I didn't want to sit in every seat and test if it was different like that because of the size of them. But here's another thing. 92 Pro FM, local references get you local work. I won screen test on Wednesday of this past week, and I got 2 free tickets to go see films at that Apple Cinema. So I will go there and I will see if maybe it was just an issue with this one particular row, and I will be able to report back. But I'm just not going to pay for that type of experience.
No, of course,
at the end of it. I mean, there's a chance that I could win movie tickets for life at the Apple Cinema because I got put into a drawing for that. So we'll see what happens. It's actually for a year, not for life. But they say movie tickets for life, and then there's a nice asterisk saying movie tickets for the calendar year.
we don't expect you to make it. That's great. Yeah. So all of this is leading to you just ending up going to the movie theater and then not seeing the movie, right?
Yeah, I bounced after. It can't have been more than 15 minutes. Got a refund. I was very happy with their refund policy. And I talked to them and they're like, was the seat broken? And I'm like, no, it's just like the way that it's designed, you have a sightline. And I showed them the photo. And then I'm like, but also like I would sit somewhere else with that, but your seats are a little bit too narrow for my build. And if this movie weren't 3 hours long, I think I would sit through it. but I don't want to be uncomfortable for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I don't want to be squished for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I wanted to go see The Batman. I wanted to talk about the movie, even though we haven't done much of that yet. But it's coming, I promise. So I look at Showcase Cinema, a place that I have not been since seeing The Joker. The Joker was the last movie that I saw at a Showcase Cinema, and even then, I did not give them any money. I had a free ticket from somebody else, and that's how I justified it being okay. The last time I paid was seeing the Robin Hood film starring Taron Egerton and Jamie Foxx.
Man.
If you just want, like, real numbers.
Was that a Guy Ritchie movie?
It was a Guy Ritchie movie, yeah.
Man.
It's on HBO Max, too, if you've never seen it, because it's awesome. It's good. I don't know if I would go with awesome. I enjoyed it a lot. But from other people's point of view, you might not. Guy Ritchie, your mileage may vary. So I booked the exact same seat in the laser projection at the Showcase Cinema. Couple of things to note. It was $1 more for the Showcase Cinema experience, but that's it. It was $14.50 to go see one of these laser shows for matinee prices, and it was $15.50 at the Showcase. That's hyper affordable. Both of them add $3 to the nighttime movie prices, but even then, $18.50 to see a movie with all of the visual and sound spectacle that they provide, that's not bad. That's not a bad price. The only issue that I had with the viewing of the Batman in laser at the Showcase Cinema in Warwick is the rear house left speaker is completely blown. So anytime any of the Atmos stuff would wind up there, it sounded awful.
Ugh.
Like, totally remove you from the immersion, like, moment. It was disappointing, to the fact that the guys, the family sitting next to me, were complaining when I was walking out, and I heard one of the girls yell to the manager, "They have a complaint about the sound," and then I got involved to be like, no, it's not just them. It's not good. This is a new theater that's been open for a week, and you have a blown speaker. You should do something about that. Because I'm not going to be quiet about it. Right now, I cannot recommend to go see a laser presentation at the Showcase Cinema Warwick because of that issue with their Atmos system.
No, of course.
I have to say that. Like, again,
especially if you're paying extra money to be in that particular showing of that movie. Like, it's the same way I feel about you going to that Apple Cinema and the sightlines being screwed.
Yeah,
is like you've ruined the entire point of this experience.
Right now. And here's the cool thing, right? I will report back on that too, because to all of the Star Pass users, Showcase Cinema sent out a free ticket to go see something in laser projection with Dolby Atmos. So next Saturday, I'm seeing the Batman again.
Nice.
And it's not going to cost me a thing. It's a 10:30 showing. I'm so happy. And then I go from that to the Cinemania party, where I might win movies for a year from Apple Cinema. I got a movie-filled Saturday. Spoilers for what the next episode of the Say Report's probably going to be about. It's about the movies. But I watched The Batman, and it did take me a little bit to get into it, mostly because it was the stuff that, like, you already know about Batman.
Yeah.
I will give them all the credit in the world for not doing the origin story again.
Yeah, like nowhere. Even with the amount of Thomas Wayne being important to this story, they don't tell you the whole dark crime alley story. Yeah. Like,
well, you know why they don't tell you, right? Because this Bruce Wayne was definitely seeing Shrek with his parents when they were killed.
They don't want it to be.
There's
Shrek.
No way they want it to be canon. But what of the movie?
The ogre.
And then Robin is Donkey. Poor Robin. Donkey. Yeah. So it's just one of those situations where that part of it is great, but spoilers for the Batman, right? I think I want to say that because I want to talk about what was the one moment in this film that totally separated it from me, and at the same time being the part that I loved the most because I love the actor. John Turturro shows up in this film as Carmine Falcone.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw him and had just like knowledge about what was going on in it, I'm like, so it's Carmine Falcone. There's no way Carmine Falcone is not the problem in this world.
Right, at least as far as this movie's going to
Yeah,
address it.
like
Yeah, yeah.
the way that it's going and the way they introduced him, and I'm just like, oh, so it's him. And it's not one of those situations where like the most famous guy in the room is obviously the killer. It's
No,
one of
because
those
that's the
situations.
same area
Yeah,
where you have guys like Colin Farrell has shown up recently
yeah.
in that scene. You also have eventually you get to what's his nuts, the DA, in a
Oh,
phenomenal like
Peter
cameo
Skarsgård.
appearance. Peter Skarsgård
Yeah,
showing up in this movie, just
fantastic.
yeah.
Oh, and Zoe
Um,
Kravitz showing up too. And yes, she's Catwoman,
well,
but
yeah,
at the
but I
same
don't think
time,
I don't think at any point Zoe Kravitz was going to be the one that they revealed to be the true villain of this movie. I don't
no,
think.
but it could be revealed that she was the rat. Like
Yeah,
there's this that's not crazy to think that she was the one feeding the information to the cops in a way to take down, Carmine and everything that was going on
yeah.
because of what they did to her friend. Like there was all these nice little moments where like it could be this person, it could be that person, but then as soon as they said the name Carmine Falcone, I'm like, well, he's the Whitey Bulger XB
Yeah.
in the Batman universe. If there's somebody who's selling out other criminals,
I don't
it's
know, man.
kind of got to be Carmine Falcone.
I was fully on board with it being Cobblepot because like that is famously how Penguin kind of comes to power in these stories is he always ends up selling out other everybody else and that's why he ends up being kind of who he is. So like I was actually fully on board for that. Once they reveal that it wasn't him, obviously it became pretty obvious who the next person
Yeah,
in line
and
was.
and I do give them credit that it wasn't like an immediate moment. Like they didn't like try to chew scenery with who it was after that. It's
Right.
like it's not Penguin, but oh god, it was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, first of all, Colin Farrell. I love Colin Farrell, and he is unrecognizable in this film. But I don't know why he decided to be Robert De Niro. Like
I don't
it
know.
was weirdly
Yeah.
distracting, especially on like the heels of Joker, where that Joker was also kind of Robert De Niro in Kings of Comedy.
Yeah.
Like it was I'm just
I
like, we get it. Robert De Niro's pretty great, guys, but
I think the idea of leaning into the American gangster is really all that you're seeing, and I think that for a lot of these guys, that is De Niro and that sort of thing.
yeah.
I was actually thinking more Al Pacino, a lot of it, in a lot of what Farrell was doing.
Well,
But
can
it's
I tell you
it's
the
the same
craziest
ilk.
thing? Yeah, well, they played the same no. The craziest thing is that Colin Farrell is on record saying he based his performance on Fredo from the Godfather films, and I'm just like, I feel like you watched those movies wrong because Fredo is not nowhere near as cool and capable as you made Oz, man. Like,
I don't think Oz is cool and capable though. Like that's what I really want to. Okay, so I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
yeah,
Like
you haven't
the
been able to get
Tiger
yeah,
on the Table, right?
yeah,
Like as I talked about, like I've been waiting to go back to it. I think that everything from the style of it to the acting and the music is some of the best Batman music I have heard since Elfman. So all of that, right, is what I'm feeling right now. One of I think the coolest things about this movie that I think the reason why I love it so much is just the characterization of these people on screen and so much just Batman universe just there. And Reeves has gone on record saying that was kind of his hope,
that was
right?
the
Is
point. Yeah,
that he wanted to establish a world that already kind of existed. Part of the problem with these Batman origin stories is it always seems like the first thing that always happens is Batman, and then like because Batman, then you also end up with guys like the Joker and stuff like that. And like this is like, no, this is a Gotham that was going to shit, and Batman just became a thing that came out of that. And so the idea of just like established characters already in powerful positions who have already done things, hell, who have already been arrested. I mean, like I'm sure we're going to talk about the big moment in like the middle of the second or the end of the second act of this movie, but like that idea that shit has already started to happen in this world. And so on top of that, you also kind of have these really cool like interactions and moments where people know some things about somebody but not necessarily other things, and it felt like not like we were watching like a sequel without the first movie, but it felt like we were watching a world we already all kind of have an idea about. And we do, because there have been a dozen Batman movies before this. We don't need the whole origin story of Bruce Wayne again. And this is the first time that we're seeing a comic book movie writ large that is just off the bat just being like, no, this is just the world that we just live in. I think the closest thing to it might be like Punisher Warzone or something like that like didn't go anywhere because like it was such a small like release and just didn't hit on the same level that like a Batman does. But like it's really kind of the first time that we're successfully seeing a comic book franchise walk in the door and be like, we all read comic books, we all got this, let's just do this. And like that feels really cool.
yeah. It's certainly with a DC property. Because like on a level, I think that's sort of what Marvel has been doing. And to see that approach with Batman is pretty awesome. Yeah. And I mean, I liked all that. I think the biggest issue with this film for me is my favorite scenes with Batman were when he was Batman, but not in the bat suit. When he was quote unquote in the Drifter outfit or costume, which, and I'm going off of, that's what marketing calls him, is Drifter Batman.
Yeah, I mean, like it's very much, it's the ninja Batman. I mean, depending on if they ever do anything more with this particular world, and if they get into any
apparently it's going to be a trilogy. People have signed 3-movie deals. I don't know if that's going to happen, but
but also in addition to like the TV shows and stuff, right? If they ever address anything like Ra's al Ghul or anything like that, like you can imagine it's probably an outfit that Bruce picked up when he was training. If that's going to be the origin they use, it felt like, again, it was kind of harkening back to the idea that there was a period in which he was not Batman, but he was becoming Batman that we just didn't see, and I love that.
I loved it. Everything where he was like just in that big buffy coat and stuff and had his face covered. I'm just like, I love this. This is what I want. But then it made me realize that this was a really good movie, and this was a movie that I liked. I don't necessarily know if it was a great Batman movie.
That's really interesting, because the main consensus right now, just to throw all the cards on the table here, the main consensus from audiences right now is it's not a phenomenal movie. For that would be like The Dark Knight, but it is the best Batman movie. It's the most comic book accurate Batman movie people have seen, and I have to kind of lean towards that, man.
I can't really disagree with that. Yeah, but right. I don't.
What?
Well, that's the thing. But leading through, but it being a good Batman comic book representation doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good movie. Like that's like it's not a good Batman movie. And that's the thing, is that I need to change my thinking to, this is what a Batman movie can be or could be, and still be considered a Batman movie. Because I watch this movie, and when all of the moments that like really sing and soar for me are when he is being Bruce Wayne trying to solve mysteries, or when he is not in the bat suit, just trying to exist and follow people and be the detective. Like, those are the moments that soar for me in this movie. The movies where he's in the bat suit are the movies where I inappropriately laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Like the thumb drive thing was so fucking funny to me.
I laughed at that.
Yeah, okay, but I'm glad, but no one else in my theater laughed at it, and it was not a hyper empty theater. And the thing that really did it for me is that he's got that bat dagger that he stores in the symbol of his suit. Mm-hmm. Totally straight out of Superman 2. Like, I couldn't not think of it. And it's hilarious to me. It's the funniest fucking thing in the world to me. First of all, that's a dangerous place to store a weapon. But second of all...
What? Straight out of Scott Snyder. That's in 0 Year. It is like the end of the whole Riddler story in 0 Year. Is the reveal that he pulls the symbol out and cuts the wire with it. It's like a huge thing in those comics. Like that is like.
Well, I know they recreate that exact sequence. It's just, oh my god, it is so goofy to me. Probably because of the stuff from movies that are influencing how I approach Batman. Right.
And like, so to the point that I was saying earlier, right, is I definitely do think that, like, oh, that's silly, and how convenient that happens and all that sort of stuff. That is all here, right? The goofy side of it being a Batman movie is present. And that was made all the more clear to me because the preview that they showed at the end of all of the previews they showed, the preview that they showed just before this one was Super Pets. And it was the new reveal Keanu Reeves Batman Super Pets trailer. For anybody that doesn't know, that was like the big trailer drop when this movie came out, is they did this entire one focused specifically on Keanu Reeves as Batman in that movie. And the jokes in that movie are, all to their credit, probably going to land really well because of how true they are, were then immediately emulated in the first 20 minutes of this movie. And so I was laughing my ass off and really nervous about what the next 3 hours of my life was going to be, because I went from Keanu Reeves being like, I'm the Batman and I work alone, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden the opening of this movie is Robert Pattinson being like, I am the Batman and I work alone. And I was just like, guys, you can't use the same lines. Don't do that to me.
No, we have to. We have to mirror. It's how it works. But we probably shouldn't show you the mirror before the mirror.
Right. And so
No.
there, so that is definitely all there,
Yeah.
which I think is why a lot of people are really kind of struggling with the idea that they really like this movie and enjoy this movie and think it's a good Batman movie, but they can't bring themselves to be like, but it's a good movie. And that's ridiculous to me because as far as I'm concerned, I sat down for a 3 hour long film, which is a slog for some people. And you know what? I enjoyed every second of it. At the end of it, when I came out of it on the other end, I was like, you know what? I don't know why I was so nervous in those first 10, 15 minutes because I was liking what I was seeing. My only concern was, oh no, this is all anybody's going to talk about when this movie's done. And that's just not
That's
not a
not the
problem.
case at all.
That's not it's
Yeah.
also not the case, but it
Yeah.
also shouldn't be my problem, right?
True.
Like
I
yeah.
guess I wish I had seen it with you. I wish I'd seen it with one like-minded individual who felt like they were in on the joke. I mean, I'm going to see it again because I definitely, I just didn't know how to feel about it at the time. And where I've come down is I liked the movie, like the mystery of it and the
Yeah.
acting, even though knowing that Falcone was ultimately going to be the stool pigeon,
Mhm.
like because I know the world, which also that's sort of that's that nice type of filmmaking. It's what people complain about with Order of the Phoenix, that it's only a good Harry Potter movie if you've read the book.
Yeah.
Like sometimes that's okay if they tell the story fine enough for those people who haven't read the book or aren't familiar with the source
Yeah,
material.
sometimes it's okay to act like maybe your audience isn't familiar with every inch of this universe,
Yeah.
but as I think that's a sign of why this is such a good Batman movie is like as in 2022 specifically is the way that it balances the stuff that everybody knows, so we're just not going to talk about it, with the stuff that some people probably do, but we have to address it because we have to tell this story, right? They walk a very fine line in this, which is why I'm also very interested to know about like the 30 minutes or so that they apparently cut from this film. Like, I want to see the whole thing now at this point.
I hope that it's more Riddler stuff. I loved the Riddler. I thought it was good, but at the same time, it just kind of felt like it existed.
Yeah, it's very separate. I just kept thinking of Seven and the idea of
Yeah.
the killer and that who you never really get like a true answer on anything from him either. And the fact that he doesn't show up for like an hour into the movie and in this you really don't see the Riddler. Like I really enjoyed that. I think what's really cool is that part of the thing is with the Riddler is everybody kind of is aware like Edward Nygma and all that sort of stuff. So having him be like a serial killer and trying to find out who he is definitely an interesting mystery, but we already kind of all know the answer to that. So adding into that the mystery of like the stool pigeon and what's going on behind the scenes with the corruption and stuff, I was not I not that I guess I was not ready for that. Like it was very cool and a very big surprise
Yeah.
that because I was just ready for it to just be a whole mystery about who's the Riddler and like knowing who the Riddler is, I was wondering if how they were going to keep that up for 3 hours and that's how I guess.
There was a moment where I'm like, oh my God, is it going to be Hush? Is it going to be Tommy Elliott?
They definitely they hint towards the idea of a Hush in this
Yeah.
movie. They do that sort of stuff all over this movie where they just hint towards possible things that are out there. They mention offhandedly things that exist in the world that you're like, oh man, eventually that leads to like the story with Scarecrow and stuff. And like, yeah, a lot of people are really excited because the establishment of Arkham as the Arkham that it is. A lot of
Yeah.
people now are like, ooh, they could do like a Strange story, right? Like a Doctor Strange, like that'd be really cool.
Yeah. It's not, is it Doctor Strange? Is that his name?
Hugo
Hugo Strange is his name. Yeah.
They've in the last 20 years really leaned towards giving him just his full name.
Yeah.
But Dr. Hugo Strange is his name. Like,
Would make
he's
sense
a
because he's
doctor.
definitely a doctor.
Right. He is definitely a doctor.
Yeah, it's just one of those situations, how like Captain Marvel wasn't owned by Marvel for so long.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's a timely reference. Anywho, sorry. Yeah, but that's the stuff is that like the fact that like the Riddler didn't have like his origin stuff and just sort of existed, I loved it. But then I'm thinking like that's the kind of stuff that movies do.
Yeah.
And like in a Batman movie, like that little bit of explanation on the character would have gone a long way for me. Does that make sense?
They get to that moment where they find his books and they talk about how he's just a like
he's
like,
just
I
a
think
guy, which
he's
is
just
fantastic.
a guy. And they mention like he just worked at this bank. He happened to have access to these books, and it led to him figuring all of this out because of the kind of brain that he has. He was able to put all the pieces together, and then like it sent him off the deep end. And like I don't know, a lot of the stuff that they leave off the table is really kind of the like that is why I liked so much of this movie is because of how much it was willing to just let me just fill in the pieces for myself.
Yeah, and live in it. But I just he's such an interesting character, and you hear like what Paul Dano quote unquote went through to like embody the character. And it's like those scenes where he's like in the mask and everything are great, and especially the scene where he's arrested and the way that it like just mirrors moments from the comics is fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's just like I just want like a little bit more. Like I want those scenes, and I don't want them to be exactly like this. But when Arnold Schwarzenegger is watching The Year Without a Santa Claus,
right,
in Batman and Robin, like
Yeah,
those moments with him, and
it's a movie that avoids humor. It's not that it's not there though, because as you mentioned, like there are definitely moments where I mean you just kind of have to laugh when the thumb drive thing happens, or like when I mean come on, that moment when he flies for the first time, like
I lost my fucking shit. It was
like,
ridiculous.
Wrecks himself on that bridge is so good. Like it is funny. It is funny stuff. So it's not a movie that's devoid of humor. It's just a movie that finds its humor in a very different way than 90s Batman.
It finds its humor by laughing at Batman, which is actually sort of where Batman comes from. I mean, that's what 1960s Batman was.
Yeah.
He was part of the joke. Right. Not necessarily in it. You were laughing at Batman a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's why you got things like bat shark repellent and things like that, right? Yeah.
And the Bat-2C.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. I highly recommend it. We've talked about some big parts, but there's a lot of movie there that we haven't touched on.
Zoe Kravitz is amazing.
So good.
But
it made me want to watch High Fidelity again. No, it didn't.
But you know what's really wild is like this movie's marketing has been so hell bent on telling you that this is the story of the Bat and the Cat, and like and this focus on her, and she's definitely present. There was only one moment in the entire movie where I was like, man, it's been a while since we've seen Selina, and then the second those words like came out of my brain, she then drives on screen on that. So like she's definitely present in this film. But the ways in which this movie is so focused on Bruce and Gordon, and like Jeffrey Wright as Gordon in this movie,
so good as Jim Gordon.
It was I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't expecting it, and it was such a great surprise. And like I really hope that this supposed HBO series focused on the GCPD uses him. Like I hope they utilize Jeffrey Wright as and his rise to commissioner, because I think even by the end of this movie he's still not commissioner, right?
No, he is not commissioner at all.
Yeah, he's still a detective. Yeah.
I don't know. It was good. It was fun. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to see it again now, knowing and understanding the pacing of it. And maybe I'll see some of these things that I missed. I liked it enough to want to go see it again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
it's like,
for sure.
And that's exactly how my Hot Fuzz love affair started. Like that first time I saw it, I'm like, well, the end of the movie is a great payoff, even though I didn't love how long it took to build up. And then I saw Hot Fuzz that second time, and I'm like, oh my God, everything at the end is mirrored in the beginning, and it's fucking brilliant. Yeah. And then 5 more visits to the cinema later, it's the movie that I've seen the most times in theaters.
Yeah. Well, and and at the end of the day, Matt Reeves at the helm for this movie, you do get a little bit of that rub off of like a lot of promises that are being made that probably won't pay off. And to his credit, I will point this out. Unlike J.J. Abrams, his partner in crime for a lot of that sort of shit, he has openly talked about how he does not intend to follow threads. He is hoping that if they come back to this world, that they just get to keep being unique and keep doing that. He just loved the idea of just filling the world out. So to that point, a lot of the stuff that I understand that got cut out is a lot of the eventual Joker stuff that happens.
Unseen Arkham inmate.
Yeah, and apparently like he was never ever going to be truly ever seen. Like there was never going to be a full on like face shot where you got everything from him. It was going to be a lot of that in shadowy type stuff. A lot more conversations with him though. Specifically, apparently, Batman going to see him early in the investigation because he wants to see if he can kind of like get into the mind of a killer type stuff, and it fails miserably because Batman's not ready mentally to go up against the Joker like in that way. And so so Reeves talked about how he felt like he was laying a lot on to a character that he doesn't really have much interest in. Like he liked the idea of the Joker existing and being in this world and having it be a story that him and Batman and Gordon had already dealt with, but he has no interest in going back to that. Now, we'll see what the money says. Like if the next one is not the Joker escapes from Arkham in any way, I will eat my hat, I guess.
And Venom will show up in the third movie.
Yeah. But no, this idea that there are just threads throughout this movie, right? Because we talked about earlier, there's even like hints at things like Hush and possibly being a thing and all that sort of stuff.
And speaking of Venom,
Yeah.
he definitely injects himself with a viscous green liquid.
Yes, there is definitely a moment which, if it is based on the Venom in the Arkham in the Arkham universe, is actually partly based on the stuff from Ra's al Ghul's Lazarus Pits. So if he did see Ra's al Ghul at any point in the past and became that, it could easily be like a like what's the metabolized version of that he can like carry around from
Yeah.
the Lazarus Pits that could eventually then be reworked into Venom in future movies. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the
Well,
threads
especially
of
when
this
you
movie
consider
lay
that,
down.
like, the whole Batman getting addicted to injecting himself with a specialized mix of adrenaline is
Mhm.
what happens pre-Bane. I'd
Right.
love another good Bane. And
Yeah.
not another one of these ones where at the end of the day it turns out that he's just a pawn in someone else's scheme. I
No, make
want
him
a
the guy.
straight on Bane as the villain film.
Yeah, make him the brains. Like, I mean, that's one of the biggest sins that Dark Knight Rises commits, is that at the end of the day, like the way that Bane is revealed to not be the mastermind is such a letdown.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, it totally makes sense, and like the movie is what it is. I love that movie.
Yeah,
But the
in
idea
terms of the
that
trilogy, it makes sense. But the
right,
fact that Bane is always kind of represented as just hired help when
right.
he is such an intelligent character in the comics.
Well, and complex. The
Yeah.
idea that like he also has the ability from time to time to work with Batman,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like that whole like side of him that never really gets addressed is unfair, because I mean, you know, the eventual then turnaround on Batman is always the end of those stories, but that is but the idea that they can work side by side, and there is a weird respect between the two of them that you don't really see in the film versions of him. Yeah, no, like a really good Bane story would be really fun for sure.
And just seeing that, like, that was a moment of like, oh my god, he just injected himself with the
This
stuff.
universe, Bane could definitely be a thing. I think it's going to lean more towards some guys like I think like Mad Hatter like would be a
Oh my
really interesting
god.
one, and get like a bunch of really creepy Alice in Wonderland like horror movie style like killings going on in the next one. You know, because like the way that this one leans into just some of the just like rough edges like scary movie shit is really good.
Someone that I talked to about it was my friend Eric. He saw it and he's like, I really liked how grounded in reality this film is. And what I have to think of in that moment is the flooding of the arena.
Yeah,
Is that it's not instantaneous. Like, they have time to get out, and it's because they squander that time that they really get fucked over.
yeah.
Like, the flooding of Gotham is wonderful in just in
I
terms of everything that happens.
Yeah, well, and you know, like it's not in like the big moments, like the idea that he blows up the levees, like is like over the top and not really grounded in reality. However, the ways in which that plan is structured around things like he has less than 500 followers on social media, but he's been able to galvanize them into an act of violence,
Mm-hmm.
is like a little too close to home, but also
Yeah.
like, you know, like that kind of stuff is, I'm sure, what he's referring to is like those little. It's not that like he becomes some crazy celebrity and everybody just follows him, because we've seen that also in the past in some of these movies where people just kind of go with it. Dark Knight Rises, I'll point to you again. But that idea that like there is a small enough but dangerous enough group of people that Batman has to stop them is much more realistic to me.
Right. Well, any group more than one could pose a problem for Batman. Like,
I mean, we see it in the
that's
first
the
moment of
thing.
this movie when he
Yeah.
gets the shit kicked out of him in that fight. He does not win that
No,
fight.
he does not. And that's the thing. So, like, just even if like half of those 500 viewers were galvanized to become his little militia,
Yeah.
like 250 people versus one man, like you're already overmatched in that
Right.
moment. But because you're Batman, you're not going to give up just because of the odds.
Right.
He's like Han Solo, kind of. And
Also,
also,
you know,
oh,
Pattinson as Batman, we should take a moment to be like I loved him. Like I even the like basically the Crow version of Bruce Wayne that they go with in this movie, which I'm totally down for. I mean, they put Nirvana on behind him. He slowly walks up the stairs in like his like ripped like long sleeve shirt. Like I was so on board with that. And then as Batman, he's just awesome.
well, it's that cool thing because it's a point in Bruce Wayne's life that we don't get to see explored that often. Is that year two Bruce Wayne, where like
Yeah.
Batman has become the only thing he really cares about?
Yeah.
Batman, like Bruce Wayne, is the secret identity. or the costumed identity in a lot of
Right.
ways. Like that's something that's really early on. So the fact that that's just how he's living his life and he hasn't found that work-life balance yet is wonderful. Because
Yeah.
it's so shied away from in every other type of movie.
Yeah, they pay a lot of lip service to it in Nolan's trilogy. The idea
Yeah.
that he's more focused on his parents and revenge than he is on doing what's right and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, like the movies itself never really spend any time
Well,
on that.
anytime that he has to be Bruce Wayne in that Nolan trilogy, he feels like Bruce Wayne the way that you know him, right?
Right.
Like even that moment where he's Bruce Wayne in this one, he does not keep his shit together at all.
No, no,
Like
he's
he
he there's when he's Bruce Wayne in this movie, you're convinced at every moment somebody's gonna be like, "Motherfucker, are you Batman?"
yeah, exactly. It's like
Like you
what?
expect somebody to be like, "Wait a minute."
Why do you have face makeup on, Bruce Wayne?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, let's be honest. When we're talking about Nolan's trilogy, what we're seeing is we're seeing Bale basically do his American Psycho role, where like when he's not Batman, he like puts on like the smiling Huey Lewis face, like
Yeah.
like that is his going back between the two, which is cool, like awesome to watch him do
And
that.
it's an
It's just
interesting type of Bruce Wayne
right,
too.
right,
That it's again sort of a costume, sort of a different identity, the way that he's approaching it.
but he
But
has a
it,
handle on it.
yeah, it feels so much more realistic the way that it is approached in this film.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm excited to see it again. And also, I'm going to say this, right? Because the Shrek theory is out there. A lot of people say that he was seeing Shrek with his parents, but Fast and Furious came out in 2001 as well. And if that fucking
Man.
Batmobile is not inspired by Dom Toretto's car, his muscle car, I'll give up my hands.
Yeah, yeah. This movie also does a really cool thing, the same thing that the animated series did, where everything could either be from the 1950s or 2050. I couldn't tell you which,
Yeah.
because there's LCD TVs, there's internet, there's social media, and all that sort of stuff, right? But at the same time, also like everybody is like dressed like it's 1950s, and every car looks like it's like an old like Model T. It's crazy. It's great.
Which leads to my belief that Gotham City was just cut off from the rest of the universe. We sanctioned Gotham City when we saw how dangerous they were.
I think those motorcycles that I think him and Selena drive the same motorcycle, and I think they're these old Harleys called Phantoms, if I'm
I
not
believe you're
mistaken,
correct, yes.
which are like these like old school like Indiana Jones style motorcycles. Like I love it. It was
I
fucking
love that
wild.
he has two separate motorcycles for when he's Batman and when he's Drifter. Like that, like, and I'm just like, it's so subtle the differences, but they are clearly different.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when your secret identity takes into account that maybe I just want to ride a motorcycle sometimes. It was very good. It was very exciting. So yeah, see Batman. I will see it again, and maybe I'll have worked out my thoughts a little bit different. But it's something that happened, and definitely something worth talking about. Last thing related to Batman. It was the first time I saw the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness trailer. I alluded to it before. Somebody said that he saw a Deadite Doctor Strange that somebody is sieging.
Yeah.
I saw the same Deadite Doctor Strange at the end
Yeah.
of that trailer. So
Yep.
I don't think you're alone in your theories,
Yeah,
Mr. John.
no, I know. I'm just excited. I mean, like Raimi is always one for those types of like sight gags too. So it might not be anything more than just like, hey, we use the same effect on him that we use on like the Evil Dead show and in the Evil Dead movies and stuff. But I have my running theory that at some point in one of the universes, he's going to need to get a hold of a Darkhold, and a Darkhold is going to just be revealed to just be the Necronomicon, and like Ash is going to like walk out of the shadows with like his chainsaw handed to him. Like that's always been like my beyond dream for this movie. Like I know it's not going to happen, but holy shit, I wish it would happen. And then like seeing that in the preview, I was just like, oh, don't do that to me, you jerks.
Don't tease me, Raimi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless it's about, Kraven the Hunter and the Vulture in a fourth Spider-Man movie.
Ooh.
That might happen still. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. There's one other thing that we need to talk about, and it's something that we would have talked about last week if we hadn't lost the episode. And that something is Elden Ring. And I'm kind of glad that we got an extra week for me to work through my feelings. Because last week, I would have sung the praises of Elden Ring. I would have talked about the fact that I got into my rhythm with it. My first impressions were not necessarily correct, but I understand where they come from. Last week, I would have said, I'm freaking loving this game because I had just like a really kick ass Saturday where I beat a bunch of bosses and felt like I made progress. This week, I'm sick of Elden Ring, but I'm not sick of the game Elden Ring. I am sick of everybody saying Elden Ring has redefined video games and it's the first game of its kind. And all of this credit that they're giving to this game that just kind of seems a bit unwarranted to me.
Yeah, no, I too have been seeing a bunch of stuff, especially because there's in a very loud audience of people that are fans of Horizon Zero Dawn or Forbidden West,
Yeah.
Feeling like just like Zero Dawn kind of got screwed coming out the week before Breath of the Wild, this one kind of got screwed coming out within a week of Elden Ring, and it just seems like everybody's ignoring the Horizon series. To those people, I would point out like Zero Dawn seemed to do pretty good for itself coming out in the wake of.
A lot of people were like, I have to buy Horizon Zero Dawn and finish it before Elden Ring.
Yeah,
like that grouping is out there. Those people are out there. I've had real conversations.
But there's been
them.
a lot of those people that have been like, screw Elden Ring, fucking Elden Ring, it's nothing. George R. R. Martin shit, can't finish a book, that kind of shit. And then like, so I also am like at this weird place with it because I'm just sick of hearing people argue about it. Like at the end of the day, like it seems like it's a game that a lot of people are very into. I don't see anything innovative coming out of it, but I'm also not deep into playing it like you guys are. So like,
have you played it? You said I know that you were considering getting on board.
I've touched it. I have definitely touched it. I have a friend that's very much into those games out here, and he was kind enough to let me poke around with it for a little bit. Obviously, it was a little awkward because I had somebody just like over my shoulder watching me as I was doing it, and I'm not very good at those games. But I would not say I've put any significant time into it whatsoever. No.
Yeah. That's understandable. No, I just was curious. I know that you were on the fence and you had said, is this a game that I should get? And honestly, I don't know. I think that if you wait, you're going to have the same type of experience. If you got it now, maybe there'll be more stability to the game, is like a true statement that I have to say.
Yeah.
But it really is this thing where people are like, oh, like there's no UI elements. And imagine if this was an EA game, and then there's that image of the map going around where there's a bunch of things on it where you can go and where you're supposed to go. And I mean, I talked about it in my first thing where I'm like, well, looking at the map, I took notice of those little things that they put there to sort of guide you as to like, this is a place you should head. So even though you don't have the like heads up display stuff you might get in like a Far Cry, that seems to be the one that a lot of people are comparing it to, that or Assassin's Creed, those things are still there. And there is a legend that you can bring up to define all of the stuff on the map. Like all these people are like, it's so different from any other open world game. I'm like, it's really not though. I don't know what you're trying to tell me. I don't know where you're coming to this conclusion. Are you just declaring it because of how much you like this game and ignoring the fact that like it sort of stands on the shoulders of the stuff that came before it? And not even just like the stuff that came before it in terms of 3D open world games, right? Like one of the big appeals to me from the Dark Souls stuff is just that NES style difficulty where like you're going to die and you need to learn the game that way.
Right.
Like, I mean, I talked about Infernax being influenced by things like Castlevania 2 and Zelda 2. So is Elden Ring in the fact that you don't know where you're going half the fucking time. And you walk around the map and then occasionally you find progress.
And then you run into a thing that you can't pass because you don't have the ability to at this moment, whether it's a skill thing or a tool thing. And then like what you do is you have to remember that thing is there so that when you eventually get to a point where you're confident you can overcome it again, whether you get you level up your skills or you get the right tool to move, like it's up to you to remember to go back to that thing to do it.
Right. And if this game didn't allow you to place markers, that would be innovative, right? If they put it squarely on the player to remember those places to go back to, that would be something new and different. But you can put down 100 markers, just like you can put down 100 markers in Biomutant or Assassin's Creed or Far Cry.
Like, honestly, you're more limited in Breath of the Wild. I think you only get 5 when all is said and done, and that might even be more than I.
And I think that might have changed with the DLC. I feel like the master mode stuff, because it will show you how you've been on the map, I feel like they also added more marker settings to that one as well because they realized how limiting 5 were.
Oh yeah, but that was what was so good is that you hit a point where you were like, shit, I found
I
something
have
else
to
really
go do
interesting, and I
something.
need to,
Yeah.
I need to figure out like how to get one of my shiny markers back so that I can follow it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those, it just feels like, and then these other people who are like, keep a quest log for yourself so that you can remember where things are, and then other people coming down like, no, don't do that. That's how we played games on the NES.
Why would you not do that?
There's a reason there's a note page in the instruction manual for
Yeah.
almost every game that released on the NES and SNES.
It's one of my favorite things in any Zelda game is even the simplest ones. I like to have like we have really nice like leather bound notebooks that we buy when we play Zelda games that we do the puzzles in and things like that, and they come in handy. Like why would you not do that? What is the wrong with
Like
that?
like
That's just part of playing games
that's
to
the way
me.
that some people play games. And someone being like, if you're finding yourself getting lost in Elden Ring, don't be ashamed to start a quest log for yourself and take notes. Have a notepad. Like, do however you have to do so that you don't feel overwhelmed in the game. And then other people are like, no, don't do that. That's stupid. And I'm just like, stop policing how people are going to approach this game, where the game itself is just like, come at me however you want.
Yeah.
Do what you can. Though I will say, the thing that annoys me, right? I got to a point in the game, and this is not why I'm sick of Elden Ring talk. It is literally people acting like it is the second coming and it is a renaissance for gaming, when it is just the same sort of stuff that we have been seeing for so long. And one step further, it's so built on Dark Souls 2, which everybody shits on as the worst Dark Souls game, but there's so much Dark Souls 2 in this game, which, surprise, surprise, is the same producer on both games. So it makes sense that he would want to revisit a lot of the stuff he did. But the thing that happened here, and I have to say, Mark, stop listening, because you said you didn't want to hear what was going to happen about this boss. I got to a boss in the game, and everything that was happening in the game kind of felt like, oh, this is the end boss of the game. Like, this is the end of the game. I'm supposed to get into the Erd tree. I'm at the Erd tree. I'm at the foot of the Erd tree, and here's a boss. And it was one of the few bosses where I got like a full-on cutscene before the fight, where he's like, these were the other lords. I murdered all of them, and now I come for you. And it's just like, am I supposed to be here? Is the influence of this being like Breath of the Wild style to the fact that you can finish the game as soon as you can get to this boss and defeat this boss? And I'm like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to see what happens. So I beat him. I beat him this morning. I don't even know how many tries. It was a fun fight. It was a fun fight to learn his patterns and learn how to exploit him. I had a good time with it. And then I beat him, and then I go into the Erd tree, and I try to touch it, and it's like, you're blocked by thorns. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I rest at a site of grace, and a maiden comes up, and she's like, yeah, so you were blocked by thorns, right? Here's where you need to go. And it was the first time that this game has straight up told me this is where you need to go to further progress in the game, which also kind of seems counterintuitive to all of the arguments that this game doesn't give you any guidance.
Yeah.
Like, she has this discussion with me, and then she's like, I've placed it on your map. And then a huge like text box, a red mark has been placed on your map for as to where you need to go. And I'm like, oh, okay. Did this not happen for other people, right?
Yeah,
it's a guy who beat the game in 37 minutes. Did he just ignore this moment? Like, I didn't know how to feel about it. I was happy, right? I have no idea how to get to that red dot, and I'm excited to have to figure out what I'm doing now.
Right.
But it just felt like it doesn't tell you anything. And then here's where you need to go to progress so you can enter the Erd tree. And I'm like, cool. I was happy about it. Like, I didn't think that was going to happen. This was an interesting moment for me.
Oh, man.
I don't know. It's very strange the way that people are talking about it. And I'm still going to play it, but I'm probably going to take a break to play Tunic, because Tunic looks amazing and it comes out on the 16th.
Okay, man.
So
right. Well,
we'll
I
see.
look forward to that.
Yeah. But that's it. I mean, Elden Ring, go find it, enjoy it, and do what you want with it. But I'm just tired of the policing of how you can enjoy it. Like,
I mean, yeah, it's unfortunately the very nature of these From Software games is it brings out some of the worst toxic gamers in that regard. As far as the how you're supposed to play video games, people like screw that.
yeah, and I guess I just never noticed it before because I wasn't. It wasn't everywhere. Like in a
Yeah.
weird way, it feels like it's broken into the bigger
Oh yeah, well yeah,
mainstream.
no, I mean because these games have gotten bigger and bigger with every one of their releases. Dark Souls 3 was huge and things like that. But also, you know, you add to that you also have the George R. R. Martin of it all this time around, and so more people are opening doors to those conversations just because of that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. I wanted to talk about Elden Ring, the fact that I am still playing it, and last week it would have been a very different. I was wrong, but then no. I think I was right. That doesn't mean I'm not going to play it. I understand why I felt the way that I felt.
Yeah.
All right, but that's everything I got this week. I can't think of any other thing. Well, I have one other thing, but I want to put it into the outro of everything. So, is there anything else you'd like to add, Siegen, before we?
No,
finish
I'm good, and now I'm curious.
Oh, okay. So here's the deal. The Siegen and I also do another podcast called the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. And this past Friday, we've just released our episode for the month of March. That's My Boy, starring Andy Samberg and Adam Sandler. And it's interesting. But here's the thing. Here's the big thing that I want to share with everybody. I have a personal goal, and I can't do it on my own. I need the entire army of the Say Report to go out there and tell two friends and have those two friends tell two friends. It's basically a pyramid scheme that I'm looking for, but not to take your money, but to get That's My Boy into the top 10 on Netflix, even just for one day, before it is removed from Netflix on March 31st.
Just in the top 10, right?
Just
like
in the top 10.
10.
I don't need it to be number 1. It can be number 10. It can unseat Shrek from where Shrek has been for the last 3 days.
Go ahead, guys. Go out there, put it on. Like, just put it on in the background.
So
put it on for your dogs while you're at work.
If you leave Netflix on for your animals, put on That's My Boy. If you're like not sure what to watch, rather than scrolling through everything, watch That's My Boy. And if you watch That's My Boy,
why the real reason we're doing this is because this movie's fucking ridiculous.
This movie is fucking absurd. It's crazy. Not to spoil this movie, I can't believe that this movie exists. And the more that I interact and engage with it, the more I kind of love it.
Oh God!
And I don't know what to do about that. To the fact that there used to be a Twitter, like a live tweeting thing that I would take part in. And I suggested That's My Boy because I had just watched it and I thought it might be fun to live tweet it with other people instead of Siegen, see if I like really cared about it. And it went over so well that live tweeting of movies group is now a live tweeting exclusively of Adam Sandler movies group. I hijacked an entire live tweet group to go from the entire pantheon of cinema to just Adam Sandler movies.
Yeah.
My power needs to be checked, ladies and gentlemen. That's another thing. But it's just a thing that happened. But I think it would be really interesting, right? It's just like sort of grassroots, right? Who are we? We're just the Say Report. But if we could do it, if all of us could bandy together to get That's My Boy into the top 10 before it leaves on March 31st, 2022, it would be awesome. And if you're going to be watching the movie anyway, why not go over and check out our episode at the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe podcast, right?
Boom. There you
3
go.
birds, 1 stone. Something. Yeah, 3 birds, 1 stone. I'll stick with it. But that's everything from me. Siegen, anything else?
No, not at all. This has been a wild couple of weeks. Sorry about last week getting a little fucky, but I'm glad we had something for you guys.
Right. And we're going to get better, right? We're going to actually fix it up. Once everything comes in, we're going to make sure that something like that never happens. But it's kind of cool to officially have a lost episode of the Say Report now, right?
Yeah.
But that's it. So, if you would like to talk to Siegen specifically about the music from The Batman, I know that he is looking for someone to discuss it with, and I know it's not me. You can find him on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
And if you want more information about the ASCU and other projects that we do and how to get in on that Twitter group that Devin took over, you can reach him at Devin D. Decker.
I look forward to you joining us. Thank you for listening, and until then, Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Siegen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.